So let's get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the webinar on the topic of resilient supply chain and advanced manufacturing, and Switzerland as a location for ASEAN companies. A warm welcome from Switzerland to all of you. So my name is Sirpa Zimal. I'm with Switzerland Global Enterprise. That's the official investment promotion agency of Switzerland. Our organization helps international companies in evaluating Switzerland as a tech and business location for their expansion projects. And I will be hosting this webinar. The program today is the following. We will have the great pleasure to have a welcome address by Ambassador Mr. Fabrice Fillet. He's the ambassador of Switzerland to Singapore. Then we have a short intro presentation by Kamala Lardi, CEO of Lardi and Partner Consulting. She's going to talk about digital transformation in supply chain. And then followed by another intro presentation by Andre Güdel. He's the head of international headquarters at KPMG Switzerland, who will give you some more insights about advanced manufacturing in Switzerland and talk about pharma production as a use case for Switzerland. We will then open up the discussion, which will be moderated by Andreas Enderlin. He's the managing partner at Hugo Capital Partners. And he's also leading the Digital Transformation Award at the Singapore Swiss Chamber of Commerce. So if you have any questions, there's a chat function on the right-hand side at MS Teams. So please use that chat function to type in your questions. And at the end, we can also take questions from the audience. During the presentation, I ask you please to mute your microphone. Thank you. So now, without any further ado, Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, it is a pleasure for me to welcome you today to this webinar on a very timely topic, resilient supply chain and advanced manufacturing. You will hear more on why Switzerland is a preferred location for Asian multinationals. But before I pass the floor to our eminent experts today, let me say a few words of introduction. Thanks to its traditional watch, mechanical, electrical, and metal, as well as medtech industry, Switzerland has developed a highly industrialized precision cluster, now occupying a leading position in the field of advanced production processes. Characterized by particularly close cooperation between leading research centers and innovative industry, Switzerland offers international companies ideal conditions to optimize their manufacturing processes and set up high performance and digital production facilities. The great availability of skilled technical staff due to the Swiss vocational training system and a liberal labor law increases efficiency and productivity further. Switzerland is thus an excellent starting point for efficient supply chain management for the European market or for setting up highly automated production facilities. Switzerland is particularly well positioned to address new challenges many companies face when it comes to keeping their supply chain intact. The Alpine country has repeatedly proven strong and resilient amidst global crisis. Here, companies not only profit from a stable and low-risk environment, but also from a brand that has been consistently linked to high quality, technological excellence, and trust, made in Switzerland. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. Let's move on to Kamala Lardi for her presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good day, hello, wherever you are from. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kamalesh Lardi. I am a digital transformation expert and business futurist. I am the CEO and founder of Lardi and Partner Consulting, a company located here in Switzerland that specializes in digital transformation strategy and execution. I'm originally Malaysian and have been living and working in Switzerland since 2004. I'm also a lecturer for the Zurich University of Business Administration on blockchain applications in supply chain management. And I'm the founder of Bloomblock, a blockchain advisory company focused on sustainable supply chain that operates out of Switzerland and Malaysia. Now, to say that 2020 has been a challenging year for global supply chains is probably an overestimation here, because it's been an extraordinary year, and the coronavirus pandemic has really changed business environments for many organizations around the world and has highlighted the importance of being able to react, adapt, and set up sound mechanisms in order to manage uncertainty across supply chains. Now, disruption and transformation in the global supply chains have been occurring continuously over the recent years. However, some of the core challenges that exist in global supply chains have really been augmented and accelerated significantly during this coronavirus pandemic. We've had supply shocks or shocks on the supply side, where there's been significant disruptions and discontinuations in terms of access to natural resources, components, raw materials, and even finished products, as we entered into periods of lockdown and restrictions, as well as when organizations have not been able to access their remote facilities or infrastructure. And we've had significant demand side shocks as well, as rapid changes in consumption patterns occurred when people or consumers moved towards more e-commerce and digital or online channels in order to interact, engage, and even acquire products and services that they need. There's been significant demand management inefficiencies as well. These traditional demand management processes tended to depend on traditional or trend data, which became disrupted or ineffective over the last couple of months. So with these unprecedented situations, traditional supply chain management approaches have struggled to deliver outcomes. One of the key aspects of digital transformation is really looking at creating end-to-end visibility across the supply chain to manage some of these impacts, such as inaccessible supply chains, the bullwhip effect, which is basically referring to small changes or even minor changes at certain sides of the demand that has huge impacts or significant impacts across the entire supply chain, as well as visibility gaps and organizations that are focused on single sourcing strategies. And so when we look at digital transformation in supply chains, we really try to focus on four dimensions. How the supply chain delivers products and services to the end customers, so the kind of customer experiences that they gain at the end. We look at as well the supply chain operations, basically the end-to-end operations or the processes across supply chains. We also look at products and services that are being transferred or transitioned through the entire supply chain, and how those optimizations could be found across those areas. And we also then look at ways to impact the end-to-end supply chain to find new ways of delivering business models across these supply chains as well. So our ultimate goal is really to try and find ways to increase visibility across the supply chain and create opportunities across the supply chain for near real-time or actual real-time access to critical data that could actually transform the way we manage the end-to-end supply chains. Now, more often than not, a lot of these digital transformations rely on technology solutions to create benefits or to create advantages, such as optimizations, create greater visibility across the supply chain, increase efficiencies, and encourage collaboration between stakeholders in the supply chain, as well as create access to real-time data that's critical for management of the supply chain. For example, point of sale data that could be directly accessed. Now, in these cases, supply chains, as they start to look towards reviewing the supply chains and creating a new normal environment in the post-COVID-19 business situations, emerging technologies become a critical element for improving efficiencies. And supply chain leaders who are able to combine, connect, and capitalize these emerging technologies across the supply chain will be able to build systems that could withstand and even manage the future disruptions in a more effective way. One example of this is augmented reality, where we've seen many organizations utilize augmented reality with mobile devices such as iPads or even smartphones to allow frontline workers to provide maintenance and remote assistance in the pandemic environment. We've also seen applications of 3D printing in additive manufacturing to shorten delivery times and create inventory efficiencies or reduce the need for inventory. So 3D printing really creating hyper-localized networks of component supplies across different regions. We're also seeing applications of artificial intelligence across various areas in the supply chain management, including advanced analytic systems and predictive analytics that allows companies to really visualize their supply chain processes and reveal bottlenecks or disruptions or potential disruptions that could occur across the entire process chain. Another example is the combination of robotics, artificial intelligence, and Internet of Things and sensors to create smart factory environments that really are able to modernize production and manufacturing capabilities. In my own experience, I have worked on developing blockchain solutions or a blockchain platform for the palm oil industry. Working out of Switzerland, we developed the solution for the Malaysian Palm Oil Council with the objective of really creating end-to-end real-time traceability for palm oil from palm to plate, really trying to pinpoint the locations where fruit bunches are harvested and to monitor or track the harvest through the supply chain in order to prove provenance or origin of the supply of the palm oil, ensuring that there's no deforestation. In addition to that, the platform that we've built is able to potentially monitor plantation management data to create rich data around crop harvesting, as well as to monitor worker conditions such as contract management and healthcare management. Being in Switzerland was a great advantage for us because we had direct access to the latest thinking and knowledge around blockchain development. We were able to also participate and be an active, play an active role in accelerators in the startup scene in order to really get the latest understandings around blockchain application in supply chain management as well as other areas, and look at some real case examples or real applications for these new technologies. And we had a direct access to an experienced pool of talent here in Switzerland that's experienced in really developing blockchain solutions. Now, Switzerland for me stands out as an innovation and technology hub because I've been personally involved in startup accelerators as a mentor, such as the F10 for FinTech and CV Labs for blockchain development, where we are really working through real-world examples and use cases to develop emerging technology solutions for various industries. There are also significant or well-known educational institutions such as ETH, as well as associations and national level initiatives such as Digital Switzerland that really focus on improving developments across various supply chain management applications such as artificial intelligence solutions, blockchain solutions, as well as smart factory solutions. So there's a lot more I could share on this, and I really look forward to sharing more of the information during our panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kamalesh. Really interesting to hear, and we can dive deeper during our discussion then about the tech capabilities of Switzerland or in Switzerland. Now let's move on to Andre Güdel from KPMG. He also prepared a little presentation for us, diving deeper into pharma production. Andre.
Thank you, Sepa, for this kind introduction. I'm going to share now the screen with all of you. I hope everyone can see the screen.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So Camila, thanks for your overview about digitalization of supply chain. I want to give a brief overview about application of such technologies and where Switzerland stands in this highly complex field of pharmaceutical and biotechnology manufacturing. My name is Andre Güdel. I'm with KPMG in the field of business development, and my focus is on life sciences and especially supporting companies from outside of Europe, mainly Asia and the US, who wants to commercialize and in certain cases also produce their life science products in Europe. Now, starting with the life science industry, I'd like to give you an overview of trends in biopharmaceutical manufacturing, and then I want to dive a little bit more into details about where Switzerland has its particular strengths in regards to biotech and pharmaceutical manufacturing. If you look at the market, the biopharmaceutical market, this is a market which is in strong growth. We estimate a CAGR of almost 7% over the next years. However, within this biopharmaceutical area, there are different points which stand out and which are particularly important when you look at manufacturing. One is the production of biologics, in particular monoclonal antibodies, which is a form of proteins used in many applications, especially also in cancer therapy. This is becoming more and more popular, meaning that there is a growing need for such productions. Another topic is everything related to cell and gene therapy. So those are therapies which actually work in the area of the genetic codes. As you probably know, with these technologies, there is the possibility that the genetic engineering products are released for patients. Another one is there are new forms of drug delivery. Drug delivery, which is especially designed for each patient, specially and individually. So there's an individualization going on in the field of biopharmaceutical products, and I'll come back to that. Then also I mentioned that the cancer drug industry is growing quickly, rapidly. This is the fastest growing area within life sciences production. In the similar way, you see expansion of the biosimilar market. Biosimilars are products which are actually biotechnological products, but they are generics. So their patents are, there's no patent protection anymore. So biosimilar companies are emerging. Many of them are actually from India and from China. The market for biosimilars is growing strongly in Europe. There are a lot of biosimilars already approved by the European Medicine Agency, but also in the US. And then the last one is precision medicine. Precision medicine is meaning that there is a patient-centric view on the products. So products are not designed for the large patient group, but specifically for individual patients. So how does that translate into manufacturing? One is that the manufacturings are becoming more complex and demand-driven, and with more complexity, I mean there are actually instead of large batches, companies are actually demanding the production of smaller batches of production. So we call that the modular manufacturing approach, where you have, instead of large production facilities, you have smaller modular manufacturing facilities, which can be easily adapted to special patient needs and special groups. Then there's an increased use of external resources. Many pharmaceutical companies are looking into actually outsourcing the manufacturing of products entirely to contract manufacturing and development organizations. This is the case for large and mid-sized companies. Then you have a growing number of so-called virtual biopharmaceutical companies, which actually only consist of a management teams, and they have outsourced everything from drug discovery to drug development, and then finally to testing and to the production and to the distribution to contract organizations. And then this is what Kemal has touching on. There is a strong focus on data integrity, on Internet of Things. Pharma 4.0 is the buzzword here, and then also application of data for market prediction. So the entire part of digitalization is enormously important for pharma production facilities in biopharmaceutical. Now have a closer look now to Switzerland and where Switzerland stands in this entire world of production of pharmaceutical products. This chart here shows you where Switzerland is actually located, and comes probably to a surprise for many of you. Switzerland is the leading company in Europe for production of pharmaceutical products in value, not necessarily in volume, but in value. One wouldn't say that Switzerland is a center for life science production, given the high salaries, but production in this area highly depends on very qualified talent and workforce, and less on large numbers of workforce. So Switzerland is by far outpassing UK and Germany and the other countries. Looking into the entire value chain of pharmaceutical production and where Switzerland has activities. So pharmaceutical production starts, or pharmaceutical value chain starts with drug discovery and development. Then there is a part which is mainly regulatory. Regulatory compliance is obviously very important. Then there's the manufacturing part, and then the distribution part, and the sales and marketing. And within the manufacturing part, and now we are talking about biopharma products and biopharmaceutical products, Switzerland has a strong point in production of galenic drugs, so the final products. Here, many companies are active, but Switzerland has also an activity in API, active pharmaceutical ingredients. Usually there is a view that only India is producing APIs, but in Switzerland there's also a significant number of API manufacturers, as it is in other parts of Europe, by the way. If you look at packaging, which is also a very important part within the pharmaceutical value chain, there's also companies which are doing nothing but packaging, which is a highly complex process. If you go a little bit a step further down into generic therapies, so these cell and gene therapies, which I have mentioned, which are new forms of therapeutic products being brought to the market and which are highly individualized. There is, particularly in the field of manufacturing, there is a strong edge in Switzerland, production of viral vectors or plasmids, and also final drug manufacturing. So Switzerland, within the manufacturing part of pharmaceutical and generic products, is definitely a very relevant player in this field. Now let's show some example of recent production facilities which have been established. You see here companies in the western part of Switzerland. I don't want to mention all of them, but three of them are standing out. One is Takeda, Japanese manufacturer, which has a large manufacturing plant in canton of Neuchâtel. Quite an impressive facility. Then we have Lonza Visp. Lonza has a brand new facilities in Upper Valley, a place which is not easily to reach. It's quite far away from the nearest airport, but in this facility, which is called IBEX facilities, Lonza is going to employ more than 1,000 people. Lonza is planning to have modular manufacturing plants where small manufacturing facilities are built each on the side of the other, and which gives the possibility for this very targeted small batch manufacturing. Quite an impressive facility. Also CSL Behring, which is located in Lengnau in the canton of Bern. They are in the blood processing production. They have set up last year a big facility with 300 employees. The reason why they are doing this is they are looking for the best possible employees and the most stable and best connected in location within Europe. Looking into the Swiss-German part, there are a lot of new facilities being built up. I want to mention only one, and this is the Novartis facilities in the canton of Aargau in Stein, a brand new facility which is focusing on cell and gene therapy. So producing very small batch products of medicine, which is focusing on either one single patient or a small group of patients. This is a state-of-the-art facilities. Stein has been selected because of its proximity, obviously, to the headquarters, but also because of its absolutely stable infrastructure, to connectivity, to international connectivity. They are very close to the airport of Basel and to the airport of Zurich, and the quality of workforce. So as you can see, in terms of production facilities, there are a number of projects going on in Switzerland. What are the reasons? And then also, what are some trends? I want to touch on that quite quickly. The investment environment in Switzerland is certainly attractive. There's a competitive tax system in place, which is basically nowadays a must. I mean, many European countries have a competitive tax system. So having a system which allows companies to invest and also benefit from the investment, that's a must. The general foreign direct investment environment in Switzerland is very good. Switzerland usually ranks in the top 5 to 10 in those leading rankings. And then there is a tax treaty system and a regulatory system which is fully embedded into the European Union. So production of pharmaceutical products in Switzerland are fully GMP compliant, good manufacturing practice compliant, and the tax system is in compliance with the requirements of the OECD and the European Union. That's a very important part. Many companies, they want to be in a place which is actually very connected to the European Union or which is in the European Union. Infrastructure development, there are several pharma hubs in Basel, in Zug, in Geneva, Lausanne area. There are top hospitals, and there are many companies investing in manufacturing in Switzerland. So this creates an ecosystem which is favorable. And then life science funding. Switzerland is obviously a financial hub, and funding of projects is feasible. Also, by the way, for startup companies, and as well as also that the large pharmaceutical players, most of them have actually their own venture capital funds. So all in all, quite a favorable environment. What is the outlook for manufacturing in pharmaceutical? Commercial, technical, as we mentioned, there's the digitalization going on, and also very important trends towards small batch manufacturing. So small entities rather than big facilities with large 18 cubic meter incubators. Politically, interesting. There is a European pharmaceutical strategy in the build currently. The European Union has decided within the because of the COVID crisis to develop its own pharmaceutical strategy, which has as one of the aims actually to foster development and research in Europe, so bringing back more of the R&D activities to Europe, and in the other hand also repatriating or relocating manufacturing facilities in the pharmaceutical field. So the European Union wants to support the relocation of manufacturing to Europe. Obviously, that doesn't touch Switzerland directly, since we are not part of the European Union, but we can come back on that. Switzerland can benefit from this strategy anyway. What is challenging, however, is the regulatory environment. The European Union has implemented stricter regulations. For instance, for good manufacturing practice, the labeling of products is now becoming more and more of an issue. It's called the GMP Annex 21 regulations. And another regulation which has been implemented 2 years ago is MDR, IVDR, medical device regulations, in vitro device regulations, which are regulations focusing on medical products rather than pharmaceutical products. But that's something to observe. These two regulations make access to European Union markets a little bit more complex, but can be managed. Yeah, with that, I think I'm at the end of my part of the presentation, and I'm giving back now to Sirpa for the Q&A section.
Thank you, Andre. So yes, so we heard a little bit about digital transformation in supply chain and advanced manufacturing, and how Switzerland, a small country, yet is well positioned in these new trends that we see here for digital supply chain and also small batch and very or high-tech manufacturing. So let's move on now to our discussion part. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat function so we can answer them during the discussion. But I will hand over now to Andreas for a quick introduction of yourself, and then please to moderate the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sirpa, for the introduction. Quickly to my person, my name is Andreas. I have a background in industrial manufacturing and investments. I spent some time working with different companies, 3M, Siemens, and now also here in the region, a company called Schaeffler. I was the regional president for Schaeffler here in the region. And I have an investment background in the industrial fields. I've been working for an industrial investor, investing in Europe, but also here in Asia. I've been here in the region, in Singapore for 4 years now. I'm very glad to be here today and to have a discussion about, how can we make Switzerland attractive for Asian companies moving into Europe. So maybe my first question I would have to the group here is really about, we had yesterday a result from our voting here, the so-called Begrenzungsinitiative, as we say in German. So my question will go to the group and ask, what is the impact of that vote, which was a positive vote, on the competitiveness of Switzerland as a manufacturing hub? Is it positive? Is it going to stay the same? Or is it actually going to be hindering the development of the manufacturing hub? Maybe Fabrice, or you are well positioned to answer that question. Maybe what's your take on the voting of yesterday?
Well, it's a very positive news because all our agreements, with the European Union, depend on popular support, and so a negative vote would have been very detrimental to the stability of our relation with the European Union. So it's good news. Stability is, of course, an essential element of competitiveness in Switzerland, and so we are really glad, that things can move on and that there is no disruptive vote in our relation with the European Union. So I will keep it to that. Thank you.
And obviously this makes Switzerland still attractive for foreign labor, qualified foreign labor, to come to Switzerland and actually create this environment for really high-end manufacturing, as we have learned. So for me, one question would also be, going forward now, we have heard we are, as a country, Switzerland is very attractive for high-end manufacturing. So what do we need to undertake to remain attractive in the future, and to attract further investments into Switzerland? And maybe that is a question to you, Andre. What do we need to do as a country to remain competitive?
Yes, Andreas, thank you very much for that question. It's actually an important one. Switzerland is not the only country which is trying to attract manufacturing in life sciences. The opposite is true. I mean, all the leading countries are putting in massive efforts to become manufacturing hubs. I'm thinking about Ireland, for instance, which has a fully developed life science strategy. The UK is doing the same thing. France is attracting manufacturing. We see now investment in Slovenia. We see a lot of investment in Poland, in Hungary. Germany also growing quite quickly. So everywhere these manufacturing operations are popping up, and I wouldn't say that Switzerland is outstanding in all areas, especially if you compare to Germany, also France and Northern Italy. They have very qualified workforce as well. So we are in a competitive environment, and definitely the salary costs, even so they are becoming less and less important, they are a factor. And what we believe is important is that we maintain this, first of all, very high qualified workforce. We work with many companies employ actually non-academics, which have an apprenticeship training as lab workers or manufacturing workers. This is a massive important advantage, and we see other countries trying to emulate that. It's not that easy. But that's an important factor which we have to definitely try to keep that competitive advantage. The other one is the labor law flexibility. I mean, we are all overjoyed that yesterday there was a positive vote for the daddies 2 weeks vacation. That's great news. But let's face it, Switzerland has paying the highest salaries. And why are they paying the highest salaries? Because they are the hardest workers and have less vacation. So I mean, we have to keep this. This hard-working mentality, we have to maintain this mentality, and we have just to make sure that our labor regulations remain flexible. We have a high-end fire mentality and possibility in Switzerland. We don't have the mentality, but we have the opportunity for that, and that's a big advantage. We always get questions from companies. How is it with labor law flexibility? So the labor law flexibility has to be kept. The long working hours basically also are an important factor. The general working ethics has to be maintained. When we talk to people in manufacturing, what they are saying is, look, I mean, we don't really care about the salaries. We care about the productivity, the working hours. The fact that people are actually able and willing to work overtime. So those are factors which we have to be very careful not to lose against our competitors.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you for that.
Andreas, can I share some thoughts on that?
Yes, and I wanted to actually come to you, Kamalis, because you have a kind of an outside-in view, even though you have been living a long time in Switzerland. But what is your view on what has to remain or become better in Switzerland to remain attractive?
I think some factors, obviously there's a lot of advantages and things that are playing in favor of Switzerland being kind of a central hub for manufacturing and transformation across supply chains. But I think there are some elements that could make it even more advantageous. For example, the approach towards exploration, to be less risk averse and focus more on exploration, experimentation of new technologies and applications. We're seeing a lot of that being done in pockets or certain institutions. For example, smart factories, there's a massive smart factory kind of development being done within the Switzerland innovation parks and so on. But we'd like to see a lot more of that being applied in organizations and across different industries. We're seeing a lot of the innovation still sitting in the entrepreneurship level, at startup level, and to bring that more into the kind of mainstream, larger organizational development. I think there would be something, some potential for improvements as well.
Okay, well, and that's obviously something that we are also experiencing here, sitting in Singapore, also together with Fabrice. You know, the Singapore government is doing very similar efforts in order to really drive innovation with startups and so on. So that's very interesting. That brings me a bit to the next question, because we're talking actually about ASEAN, how ASEAN companies can come to Switzerland and use Switzerland as a hub and as a market entry into Europe. So, I mean, Kamal, as you being Malaysian, you know, what recommendation would you give to a average, let's say, SME in Malaysia that might not be incredibly, you know, high-end manufacturing focused, but maybe in a palm oil producing a kind of market? What would you recommend to this company when they come to Switzerland or to Europe? What should they look at?
I mean, obviously there's quite a lot of barriers around entering new regions across the board, right, for any organization. And I think what the kind of Switzerland Global Enterprise has done is they've made it a little bit easier in terms of having information at hand and have supporting companies in entering the market as well. But I think beyond kind of the traditional approaches, there are other ways to engage. So there's a very strong community here for you know, internationalization and expansion. So if you're looking to network, you can very quickly and very easily expand your network into whatever industry or area of interest you're looking at. And Switzerland could really play the role of being a hub across Europe, or sort of an entry point. So once you've gotten a footing here, it's fairly simple to expand beyond Switzerland into the rest of Europe. And this is what we have found as well. And I've been here for quite a while, for about 17 years, and this has been my experience, the openness of the market and the ability to kind of network and engage across the board with people of various levels from various industries and organizational kind of different communities, I would say, is fairly easy. Yeah. And you know, there's a lot of information available online in terms of the different pockets. So if you're focusing on advanced manufacturing, smart factories, there's a strong community here in Switzerland that supports, you know, the local community as well as engages at a global level. There are artificial intelligence institutions like Swiss Cognitive, which focuses on creating a global hub for artificial intelligence knowledge. So my personal experience has been it's fairly open. And what we're seeing definitely, especially with, you know, the wake of the digital economy, is we're not regional anymore. We're not country-based anymore. Any organization can very quickly become global and has to become global. You have to start looking at kind of global communities of consumer base in order to really be a sustainable organization, even if you're an SME. So looking for these opportunities to expand beyond regions. And my advice would really be utilize the digital channels that you have. This is the best and probably the easiest way to engage across regions, is really utilizing digital channels, looking at how you can kind of create those digital and e-commerce opportunities for your organization as well.
Yeah. And Andre, maybe just quickly from your experience, you know, as we were saying before, we are not, if you are a Malaysian manufacturer, you might not set up with high probability, you might not set up a manufacturing base in Switzerland, but you might maybe use it as a hub to kind of enter a German market or an Italian market or further European market. So how easy is it to set up a company, you know, in Switzerland?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, unless you're in the high end or high evaluating manufacturing plant, it might be probably advisable to have your production site either, for instance, in your example, in Malaysia, or have it in other places in Europe which are more competitive in terms of salaries. What we see a lot is actually Switzerland as an absolute central hub for regional headquarters. There are hundreds of regional headquarters in Switzerland. even though we are not part of the European Union, but that's actually an advantage as well as a disadvantage. Many companies actually prefer to be outside of the European Union and have then subsidiaries in the European Union to manage their operations or for regulatory purposes. Setting up a company obviously is, from a legal point of view, fairly easy, as it is, by the way, also in most other European countries. That's not the topic. The topic is rather, finding the right people. So in life sciences, but also in others, you need actually those experts, and Switzerland is one of the most attractive countries in Europe, if not the most attractive one for talent attraction. So you easily get people from UK, from Germany, from everywhere who are qualified, and that's the big advantage. Next to that, there's a competitive tax system in place, which is very company friendly, fully compliant with the EU OECD regulations. But tax experts, taxpayers are seen as clients and not as enemies, like in other countries in Europe. So tax situation is competitive, and then you have the entire infrastructure sitting in the heart of Europe, 3 airports, basically very convenient.
Yeah. Okay. So we have been talking about, the success factors, what to do if you want to enter Europe or Switzerland specifically, and obviously, if you look at Singapore and Switzerland, we have a rich heritage in terms of our history and also a lot of similarities. So maybe a question to you, Fabrice. How do you see these similarities playing out, on the manufacturing side? Do you see a lot of similar thoughts about how to develop the economy? I mean, we're now in the midst of this crisis. You have a lot of engagement with the Singapore government. What are they doing here in Singapore to actually help the companies to go abroad?
Well, that's a quite complex question. I would say we have lots of similarities in the way we see ourselves, as a hub, as open economies, as but in the way we are functioning, we are quite different. In Singapore, you have a top-down approach where the policies are defined by the government and then they are implemented. So there are lots of incentives now for innovation, for digitalization, also for companies to build up the skills to maybe expand abroad. In Switzerland, you have a bit the other way around, lots of coming bottom up. So lots of institutions, lots of companies, our federalism also play a role. And so you have this sort of continuous buzz, looking for new solutions, looking for new ways to remain competitive and to also expand the markets abroad. So I would say the companies show a great resilience and great capacity to innovate, to cope, with the various consequences, of the COVID crisis. So it's a different approach. I think the main philosophy is quite similar. We want to remain a strong hub in Europe, in Asia. We invest a lot in skills, but the way the whole thing is implemented is a little different. And so that, I would say, what distinguishes, the Swiss way from the Singaporean way.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Fabrice, for that insight. I think, so we have been talking a lot about also the supply chain. We're living in a time where, supply chains are being disintegrated. I mean, on the political level, we can see a clear front between the US and China, and this will have an impact on a lot of supply chains. So there are a lot of trends, like, the topic of onshoring. You see that this trend is going to accelerate, and what is the impact, for Switzerland as a hub? Because if this onshoring really takes place, that might have a negative impact for Switzerland. What is your assessment, maybe, Andre?
Well, first of all, we are somewhere in this crisis, to say so. So we have probably a little bit a tunnel view. If that whole thing will be over, and I'm quite positive that the world will return to normal in the next months or years, then if the dust has settled, then we're going to probably see a little bit more realistic views on the disintegration of supply chain. The world has benefited very much from international supply chains, and this now short time discussions about bringing back paracetamol production from China to France, for instance, they might be reviewed. So I'm a little bit more relaxed towards that. But the fact is definitely that governments and companies understand that the proximity or the shortening of supply chain is not necessarily a bad thing. We saw it probably a little bit overstretched in the past decade, and Andreas, you know that probably much better than I do. So this overstretching of supply chain, which made them also fragile and vulnerable, will be reviewed. So we see something like shortening, a tendency towards shortening. How that will play for Switzerland, I think it plays well, definitively. Switzerland is very well positioned. But also the internationalization of supply chains plays well. I think in both ways, Switzerland will benefit from these developments going forward if it maintains its competitive edges towards the other countries.
Maybe. Just adding to that, Andre, can I just add a point to what, Andreas, to what Andre said. I think, irrelevant of whether we go back to normal or not and how quickly that happens, I think what has happened over the last 8-9 months is the fact that the thinking has changed, or there's been a mindset shift in a very old industry. Supply chain management is 150 years old, and there's been a significant shift in thinking towards we're not as stable as we think. There's definitely room for improvement. There's an opportunity to digitalize, which, tended to be very slow in terms of transformation in supply chain management as an industry. And now we're seeing this shift into reconsidering supply sources, thinking about localization as alternatives. And, these types of trends are growing, as well as understanding that consumption, the consumption trends, as well as the type of service and products that are being consumed could very quickly shift and transition, and how can organizations manage that? So we're seeing these types of trends definitely occurring, and I think this is a positive for the industry as a whole, and definitely a positive in terms of being in Europe and being in Switzerland specifically, because we have the opportunity now to explore new ways of managing our supply chain, new ways of gaining access to the raw materials, the components, and whatever supplies that we need. And I think this is a very positive shift that's come out of the corona pandemic.
Yeah, I would maybe add, with my personal experience, it's always about efficiency, cost, and strategic value. So there is always kind of a trade-off, right? To have the fully integrated supply chain, you don't necessarily want that. You may want to have a more local one for certain products. So I think, as you were mentioning, the world is not black and white. It's very gray. And as Andre was mentioning also, I think we will somehow return maybe to a sort of new normal. But at least here in the region, we can clearly say that supply chains are disrupted for the longer term, and that companies are making clear investments into ASEAN and kind of shifting supply chains into countries like Malaysia, like Vietnam, that is going to profit a lot from this trade war. But that's all a different discussion. But maybe back to Switzerland. What do you see some key trends in manufacturing? I mean, more on the technology side, because we have been talking a lot about automation. Automation is a concept that exists in 70, 80 years. Started very early with Mr. Ford, right, and the whole division of labor in the industry, and then moving along. And now we have this buzzword, Industry 4.0. What is really a tangible change that you're foreseeing in the future in the manufacturing environment?
What we're definitely seeing is this kind of shift from automation, so focused on efficiency and best commercial outcome, really shifting towards more of resilience building. So a lot of the solutions that we're seeing starting to gain focus and starting to gain traction as well are new tech implementations around not just automation, but really robotics applications at the factory level, also around predictive maintenance. So being able to get early warnings based on AI systems around machinery and manufacturing capabilities that could, when they would go down, what kind of conditions they're in, gaining visibility through so AI, Internet of Things, or sensor technology to be able to track your supply of your product and the condition they're in across the entire supply chain, as well as autonomous vehicles, so autonomous systems, so drone delivery, autonomous trucks and cars for transportation. So these sort of things are gaining significant traction. I don't know if you know this, but there's actually a small autonomous bus in Zug that it's a test environment to see how these would work in the real life streets, but it transports passengers from one location to another back and forth. So it's quite an interesting thing. If anyone's ever in Switzerland, you might want to go down to Zug and try out the autonomous bus as well. But in addition to that, we're looking as well at advanced analytics for forecasting, and various types of transformations or digital capabilities being applied around inventory management, demand management, supply management, transport management, and so on. So there's quite a lot of interesting things coming up. My personal favorite is obviously blockchain application to create transparency and visibility across the supply chain, as well as combining blockchain with AI capabilities to create a certain level of data analytics and data trustworthiness as well in the system.
Yeah. Okay. Andre, do you have a view on a personal level, kind of where you see really game-changing technologies?
Well, I mean, not definitively down to the technology level, but what we have seen now in the past months is, for instance, that workers from abroad commuting into Switzerland, into Basel, Geneva, they couldn't come back to their workplace, and that also the case for manufacturing workers. So this COVID crisis was a true accelerator for anything related to digitalization, to remote working, to remote controlling of machinery. So we will definitely see even more of the automation taking place, combined with remote control of the manufacturing process. That's quite interesting. And then also what Camilla said, the full integration of the different production facilities and plants through Internet of Things. This has seen a massive boost now in these days, and people understand that it is actually feasible. There was a big issue related to that's not directly manufacturing, but that's clinical trials. For pharmaceutical companies which were running clinical trials, they couldn't do those trials, and also the preclinical tests, because people weren't allowed to go to the labs. So automation of laboratory processes will certainly also accelerate.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm looking at Sirpa. I think you are already giving me signs that we are running out of time, or?
Yes, we have to wrap it up. It's time to wrap up, but let's have some closing words from you, Andreas.
Yes, well, and I would also then give it into the round. I think what we learned today is very interesting. I mean, we have been talking about supply chain, about different technologies in supply chain, and also with the example of Kamala's, on the blockchain side. We have been talking about resilience of supply chains, about integration, disintegration. What is really the advantage, and where are we gonna go as a world? In the end, we have been talking about advanced manufacturing, about Switzerland, how attractive Switzerland is in terms of vocational systems, in terms of our tax system, in terms of our stability of our political system. and the quality of our workforce. So I think if you have a company and you want to expand into Europe, I think Switzerland is a good spot to start your expansion and maybe build a small R&D and design center to work on that and have your manufacturing somewhere in the European Union or also in the Eastern European countries. So I think that was a very good kind of overview of what you can expect in Switzerland and how Switzerland is a good country to go into the European market.
Thank you, Andreas. Yes, I don't have much to add to that. You said it all. So yes, if you are looking to expand to Europe, you know where to find us. We also have Swiss business hubs in Singapore and other ASEAN and Asian markets that can support you in this whole endeavor. So thank you to the speakers, Andreas, Kamalesh, and Andre, and also a big thank you for our ambassador, Fabrice Fillet, for the intro words and the discussion. I wish you all a great day and hopefully next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.